Too many broadheads. Whew. So today we're talking about the controversial topic of broadheads. Not just my opinion of them and maybe how these designs look or how I feel about them, but how they've actually performed on the animals that I've shot. So we're gonna be talking about doe, buck, axis, antelope. We're gonna be talking about 6 different broadheads on 6 different animals and how they actually performed in a real hunting scenario. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I have a couple broadheads here on the table that performed so bad early on, we never even shot them at animals. So if you don't know a little bit about my story and the journey I've taken on heavy arrows, light arrows, broadhead selection, check out this video here where I talk a little bit about the arrow setup that I'm currently running and some of the philosophy change that I've had. But we'll get deeper into that sometime in the future. First broadhead that I ever tried is tried and true, the QAD Exodus. So this is what some people have called like the working man's broadhead. And I honestly agree. So it's a simple 3-blade design. It's got replaceable blades, which means you don't have to tediously sharpen them. You can replace them and have razor sharp blades right away. And these things fly like absolute darts. Not the broadhead that I'm currently using, but fantastic choice, and they're pretty inexpensive. But what's my experience with this? So my experience with the QAD Exodus on the first white-tailed deer I ever shot was about 20 feet up into a tree stand, shooting almost straight down on a doe. Long story short, I did not have my tree stand set up well at all to hunt this little tiny poor food plot that I was on. With the Exodus, I took that almost straight down shot down into that doe at maybe 12 yards and ended up punching through the heart and out of the chest cavity. She went maybe 100 yards and piled up. The blood trail was pretty amazing the whole way down. I tracked it for maybe 70 yards and then saw my lighted knock on, where's this arrow at? I might even have the arrow sitting here. I think it was a Easton FMJ. Yeah, here it is. I've got the date on it and everything. So Easton FMJ is 9/19/22. That was my first whitetail. But as you can see, arrow's still in good shape. Arrow didn't fully pass through, but it just poked out that chest cavity, and blood trail was awesome. No complaints with the QAD Exodus, just not the broadhead I'm using this year. So moving on, as I'm progressing as a bow hunter and trying to dial in my setups, I learned about the Ashby Foundation and what they were learning about heavy arrow setups. So, of course, I went to a heavy arrow and a single bevel broadhead. And the single bevel that I chose to use is the very popular Iron Will 150. So this is a 2-blade single bevel broadhead with bleeders, or a 4-blade broadhead. And obviously, no complaints with this guy. I have the kill shot that I got on video on a doe that I took just this last year with the Iron Will. It was about 37 yards. I shot and the doe ducked down into my arrow and ended up getting a spine shot, which is not ideal, but obviously super effective. No tracking job needed. She was dead in seconds. The Iron Wills shot really good for me at range. A couple of the reasons why I'm not using them any longer is, one, the cutting diameter. It is a pretty small broadhead, which aids a ton in penetration, but these will not give you nearly the same blood trail as some of the other broadheads we're going to talk about. In addition to that, with the practice that I do, wanting to shoot broadheads throughout the entire hunting season, even while I'm practicing, having to sharpen these all the time is really tough. It'd be nice to buy a set of practice heads and then keep a set of hunting heads, but these are also some of the most expensive broadheads in the market, if not the most expensive. That's in common use, at least. Iron Will is a great broadhead. Would never steer anyone away from them, but the cutting diameter, it leaves a little bit to be desired, and that price tag is pretty steep. So the broadhead I'm about to talk about is one that I really was hoping would be great because it's a smaller company that's changed hands a couple of times, but but that is the Method Archery VBS, or Variable Broadhead System. Man, this thing did not treat me well. I had a couple different versions, the non-vented version and the vented version. And this company's had a couple different names now. I think they started as Vector Archery, then they became Method Archery, and now they have a different name that'll pop up here. I don't know if it's machining errors or what maybe causes some of the issues this broadhead has, but one, I cannot get these to fly. With all of the extensive tuning that I do, I cannot get these to reliably group with my field points at range. They just didn't fly well in my experience. Two, the vented heads are super loud, which you can't expect that from vented heads, but when Emmy was trying to shoot these at the speed her arrow's going, she's not shooting 80 pounds, she's shooting just over 50. Just how loud this broadhead is completely disqualifies it from use for us. Couldn't get them to fly. I mean, that's a don't pass go moment for me. So these were off the table before I even shot them. The next broadhead that we shot is another tried and true broadhead, and that's the Grim Reaper Micro Hades Pro 3-blade. So just like the QAD Exodus, this is one of those broadheads that'll never let you down. The reason that I had Emmy shooting this instead of the Exodus last year was I just love the Pro Series tip that they have on there. So I'll put them side by side. Just like the QAD Exodus, what you can expect from the Micro Hades is extreme penetration and a rather small cutting diameter. So Emmy shot this on a quartered to doe last year.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
And ended up entering just behind the front shoulder and exiting the rear hip to stick into a tree. And remember, we're talking about a 50-pound bow with a less than 400 grain arrow and still had enough force to stick into a tree. So the penetration and the efficiency of cutting you get off of this thing is pretty insane. This would probably be my go-to recommendation if you're really worried about penetration on a really big game animal like an elk or a moose, or if you're shooting one of those lower pounded setups that doesn't have as much energy to push a larger broadhead through. The blood trail that we had on this, however, was not great. We kind of had to follow pin drops to where the doe died, probably 130 yards from where it was hit. The deer died very quickly, so there was a lot of internal bleeding, but the trail was pretty tough. And with such a small cutting diameter, that's not really a surprise. Where you gain penetration, you're gonna lose a little bit on that blood trail. Just a few days after Emmy shot her doe with that Micro Hades, I had a 47-yard shot on my first ever whitetail buck. And you might notice this broadhead's actually on an arrow. This is the same arrow that I put through that buck at 47 yards. And the broadhead of choice at that time was the Sevr 2.0 Robusto. Super tough broadhead. It flies really, really well, which is no surprise with the Sevrs. One thing they have over almost any other broadhead on the market is how narrow their flight profile is. When these blades are not deployed, the profile is so slim, which just means the aerodynamics and the flight characteristics are gonna be pretty awesome. And in my experience, they definitely have been. So I'm gonna be really honest with you guys, always here on this channel. And with this broadhead setup, I made a less than ideal shot and ended up getting maybe one long liver with this broadhead. And I was super nervous about it. Coming from those smaller cutting broadheads, I did not feel good about my chances of recovering that deer. But as the deer was running across the field that we shot him in, we could see blood pouring out of his side where the arrow exited. So full pass through with the Sevr 2.0 Robusto, and I could see the blood pouring out from him. He ran across the field, bedded down for maybe 3 minutes, got up and ran into this tree line where we gave him a couple hours, came back and found him stiff as a rock in that tree line. And the Sevr, even though I didn't make the shot that I practiced for, it did its job and put that animal down really, really quickly. And one thing that makes a lot of people nervous about shooting a larger cutting diameter broadhead is the fact that if you encounter hard bone, it's going to be harder to push a large broadhead through that bone. Sevr has really cool technology where it locks the blades open, and if you hit a rib, the blades will pivot around that rib or whatever hard bone that there is. So you could go from what is a 2-inch cut at max deploy, actually shrinks down to about half that size if it needs to get through something hard or go around something hard. Now with a couple animals I've shot with Sevrs, it definitely works. Absolutely phenomenal option. The one caveat I'd put on this is with a 2-blade broadhead where you're cutting a slice out of the animal, that wound channel, because it's linear, can pretty easily seal up, especially if you put a shot further back into the guts or some of the fattier areas of an animal. That fat and guts may be able to seal up that linear wound channel better than if you were shooting something like a 3-blade broadhead or a 4-blade like you see on the new Sevr hybrid with bleeders. So early this year, Emmy and I found out that we're having a baby boy, and we decided to take a trip together to Hawaii, where we were blessed enough to be able to go on an axis deer hunt. We can't afford the axis buck hunts. Again, we're self-supporting, but we were able to do an axis deer doe hunt in some of the most beautiful country you can imagine. The broadhead that we chose to use was the G5 Mega Meat broadhead. I don't have any here on me because I had to shoot multiple times until I could connect with the axis deer. About 1 pack of broadheads, missed twice, and on my 3rd arrow finally connected. On this axis deer hunt, we were able to get to about 20 yards exactly from these animals. And I made a quartering away shot just behind the rib cage and buried it into the front shoulder. So as you'd imagine, with almost any broadhead you place right there, it's gonna be pretty effective. But the Mega Meat definitely did its job. You can see in the video the deer only runs for a couple seconds before piling up in the same field that we shot it. So pretty cool. We weren't able to find any blood on the ground, but our guide did say that in his experience, these axis deer, he doesn't know if it's their hide or fat content, but they don't bleed very much. We didn't find a blood trail, but I can't say that's the fault of the broadhead. Obviously, it was very easy to recover that deer. The Mega Meat, the reason I'm not shooting them anymore on animals like whitetail this year is because of the shape of the broadhead after we recovered it. Yeah, I mean, the little blade's bent back. Did what it was supposed to, but yeah, the blades are all bent. So we pulled it out, and the blades were all kinds of mangled. They were bent back, and one of them looked like it hadn't even really deployed. I'm not sure, but it just gave me a little bit less confidence than I would want, especially if I'm using that style of broadhead. I just didn't have the confidence to keep using that broadhead with the shape that it was in. I know a lot of people have a ton of success. I believe they're reasonably affordable too, but not the broadhead that I'm using this year. The next 2 broadheads are really the top contenders here in 2024. And I'm gonna compare them head to head for you because we've shot both of them through animals just this last month. The most hyped broadhead on the market right now is the Beast broadhead from Bowmar Archery. So the Bowmars obviously just been killing some mega giant whitetail forever, and they're taking this thing against a whole wide variety of African game, and it's definitely proving itself over there. Spring deploy, meaning that you're not losing energy on a deployment of a broadhead like you would on a lot of mechanicals. But also, like that Sevr's lock and pivot technology, what you have is what they call bone avoiding technology, or BAT. I don't know, it's on the packaging in it. Oh, BA technology, look at that, BA. But the broadhead, if you encounter something hard, will actually shrink these blades down and limit the cutting diameter for increased penetration until it gets past that bone, and it'll deploy again to its 2-inch cutting diameter. Pretty sweet idea. I wish more companies would incorporate like a spring or something like this that gives it more forgiveness as it passes through an animal. But I know they worked super hard on the actual material science to get a spring like this to work at this size. So Emmy was able to make a 70-yard shot on an antelope with the Beast 2.0 just a couple weeks ago. And man, this thing was devastating. So it was a very similar angle to her doe shot last year, where it went in the near side and into the rear hip. So I will say this 2-inch cutting diameter did not pass fully through. What you had was the tip of the broadhead poking out of that rear hip. The 2 inches of cut you get here, like that Sevr 2.0, is gonna be devastating. If you're able to hit these animals where you're supposed to, the blood trail this is gonna give you is gonna be awesome. The one caveat to that is that you do have a 2-blade. So remember, that can seal up a lot easier than if you have bleeders to open it up into that diamond shape or triangle shape hole that you can get from some of the other broadheads. So I told you that the Beast has competition this year, and you might be able to tell from my hat what my broadhead of choice will be for the season. But the Sevr Hybrid 1.5 is the broadhead that I'm going to be shooting throughout the entire year, just because how well this thing has performed for me. And you might ask, why do I have Emmy shooting the Beast broadhead? So it all comes down to the fact that Emmy's bow is creating less energy than my bow. I'm shooting 80 pounds with a 450 grain arrow, while she's shooting 50 pounds with a 400 grain arrow. She's not generating as much force to push a large broadhead through an animal. So I think we have a 2.3 inch cutting diameter here on the Sevr Hybrid and a 2.0 cutting diameter on the Beast 2-inch. This is gonna take a little less force to push through an animal. And if she was to encounter something hard, even though she has lower poundage, the spring technology in there gives her a little bit more forgiveness to get the penetration needed. So why am I going with the Sevr Hybrid? First, to promote penetration, it has that same lock and pivot technology that can go around hard structures, but it's still a large cutting diameter. And you have that 3rd and 4th blade to open up the diamond shaped hole. And that's the biggest deciding factor on why I'm shooting this over the Beast. You have some of those same benefits of bone avoiding technology and the large cutting diameter, but you also have that diamond shaped hole instead of that flat hole, which I definitely prefer. In my experience with this broadhead so far, I took a shot on an antelope buck back in August, hit him almost the same exact shot as my axis deer, just behind the rib cage, buried it into the front shoulder. And he only ran for a couple seconds, just like that G5 Mega Meat shot. And what I liked about this Sevr Hybrid was with a titanium and steel construction, no aluminum in this broadhead. When I pulled it out, the broadhead was still in usable shape. If I sharpened up the blades and put a new O-ring on it, I could have shot that same broadhead animal the same day. And that gives me a high level of confidence that the broadhead is doing what it's supposed to in every single animal. For me, shooting a high poundage bow with a medium weight arrow, I opt for the larger cutting diameter broadheads because they're gonna put more blood on the ground and do more damage. And ultimately, I have to do my job to avoid hitting the shoulder or something that would require like a single bevel iron will to get through. But as long as I do my job and don't center punch a shoulder, I know those broadheads are gonna help me recover more animals. Obviously, the broadhead discussion could go on forever and ever. I'm still testing out a lot of broadheads. I am not tied to any broadhead companies. What would you guys wanna see me test out? I currently am sitting on 4 deer tags. Amy's got a couple deer tags, and we both have turkey tags. So the season is far from over. What else would you guys wanna see us test? What kind of results matter most to you? Let us know in the comments. But if you made it this far in the video, please remember to like the video, help out the algorithm, subscribe for more videos. We have a whole bunch of hunting content coming your way now that it's finally October. Thank you for allowing us to get to 1,000 subscribers as fast as we have. It's a serious blessing. Just thank you for being there. And as always, guys, may God bless you all.